You have thought about it. Not often, but once. In the dark. In that brief and private moment when the mind stops running from the question and lets it rise all the way to the surface. What does it actually feel like to die? Not the philosophy of death. Not the funeral. Not what people say to comfort the living. The feeling itself. The body's last experience. The final threshold between being here and no longer being here in the same way. It is one of the most human questions possible, and also one of the hardest to say aloud. Because the moment we ask it, death stops being abstract. It becomes physical, intimate, immediate. And that is exactly why so many people carry the question in silence for years. They do not ask because they are weak. They ask because the body is real, pain is real. And the unknown becomes most frightening when it enters the imagination through flesh. What scares us is not only death as an event, but the idea of meeting it from the inside. Feeling the body cross a line it has never crossed before. Standing, even in imagination, at the edge of our own final sensation. We avoid this question because we think asking it brings it closer. As if language could summon what is already guaranteed. As if silence could protect us from the one event every living person is moving toward. But silence does not make death gentler. It only makes fear less examined. And unexamined fear almost always grows larger than reality. People look away, change the subject, joke, distract themselves, move faster, fill their lives with noise. Not because the question is irrational, but because it feels too intimate to hold for long. Yet the strange truth is that asking the question can make us less afraid, not more. Because once fear is spoken, it stops ruling entirely from the dark. It has shape now, it has language. And anything that has language becomes slightly less monstrous than what remains unnamed. That is why taboo has so much power. Not because the subject is false, but because the silence around it makes imagination more brutal than reality has any obligation to be. The scientific answer is more complex, and in some ways kinder, than people expect. In moments of extreme trauma, the brain can release chemicals that reduce pain perception and alter awareness. Signals can slow, consciousness can narrow, in some kinds of death, especially sudden ones. There may be little or no pain at all, only a rapid shift, disorientation, or loss of awareness. The body is not always helpless at the edge. Sometimes it begins protecting the person before the mind can even understand what is happening. That does not mean death is always painless, but it does mean the body may not experience the final moment in the brutal way fear tends to imagine. Biology, in some cases, seems to include a form of mercy. It is as if the body, after fighting to preserve life for so long, also carries hidden mechanisms for softening the moment it can no longer hold on. Even awareness itself may begin to loosen before pain can fully define the experience, which means that what we fear as a single sharp event may, in reality, be partly veiled by the body's own final protection. But not all deaths are sudden. Some are slow, some are fought. Let us not pretend otherwise. Hell enters here without softness, because false comfort is its own kind of cruelty. There are deaths marked by pain, by struggle, by the body resisting what it cannot ultimately stop. There are illnesses that exhaust, wounds that overwhelm, endings that unfold over hours, days, or months rather than seconds. That truth matters, not to intensify fear, but to respect reality. Because when people sense that a script is lying to them, they stop trusting everything else it says. The honest answer is not that death is always painless. The honest answer is that dying can include pain, but the final moment itself may still be different from the long suffering that sometimes leads up to it. Pain may belong more to the road than to the crossing, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. The body can suffer deeply before death without the final instant itself being experienced as endless agony. Fear tends to fuse the whole process into one image. Reality may be more divided, more uneven, and in some cases more merciful than the imagination allows. And this is where human testimony becomes unexpectedly important. People who have been through near-death experiences often describe something surprising. Not pain, release, a lifting of weight they did not know they were carrying, a sense of leaving pressure behind. Some speak of peace arriving faster than fear. Some describe the body as suddenly distant, almost irrelevant, as if suffering belonged to something they were no longer fully inside. Others say the most shocking part was not what they saw, but what disappeared: panic, tension, resistance, the crushing sense of being trapped in flesh. These accounts do not prove a doctrine, but they matter because they come from people who passed close enough to death to lose the usual language for it. Again and again, what returns in those stories is not agony, but separation from agony. Not panic, but a strange calm. Not terror, but transition. For many of them, the real shock is not that death felt dark, but that it did not feel like the violence they had feared for years. Something softened, something released, something in them stopped fighting before they consciously chose to stop. Maybe the body is designed to protect you in the moment it matters most. Maybe mercy is built into biology. Heaven speaks here not as sentiment, but as a possibility the body itself seems to suggest. We often think of flesh as fragile, exposed, defenseless. But perhaps the final intelligence of the body is not only survival. Perhaps it also knows how to let go, to soften perception, to dim panic, to loosen the grip between self and suffering at the edge where fear expects only violence. If that is true, then death may contain a hidden tenderness beneath the terror projected onto it by the living imagination. Not because death is good, but because the crossing may be gentler than the fear that surrounds it. And maybe that is one of the strangest mercies in existence, that the body which carries us through life may also know how to shield us, one last time when life begins to fall away. Maybe the final gift of the nervous system is not strength, but surrender made bearable. The fear of dying in pain is real, but most people, when they are fully honest, are not afraid only of the pain. They are afraid of what comes after, or of nothing coming after. Pain is frightening because it is concrete, physical, imaginable. But beneath that fear lives another one. The fear of disappearance, the fear of judgment, the fear of losing control, the fear that consciousness ends in silence, or that it does not end and we are not ready for what follows. A person looking at their own reflection understands this instinctively. The deepest fear is not always suffering itself. It is standing at the edge of everything familiar and not knowing whether the next thing is presence, absence, or something language cannot hold. That is why the taboo remains so strong. The body's pain may not be the true center of the terror at all. For many people, the greater fear is not, will it hurt? But, will I still be there when it is over? And that question reaches beyond medicine into identity, soul, memory, and the unbearable mystery of whether the self survives its own ending. The body knows how to let go. Maybe the soul does too. That is as close to an answer as honesty may allow. Not certainty, not denial. Just the quiet possibility that what we fear most may not arrive in the form we expect. The final moment may be painful for some, peaceful for others, hidden by chemistry, softened by consciousness fading, or transformed into something no living language can fully report. But perhaps the larger truth is this: death frightens us not because it is only pain, but because it is surrender. And surrender is the one thing the self spends a lifetime resisting. Still, if the body can release its grip when the time comes, maybe consciousness can as well. Maybe letting go is not the opposite of life. Maybe it is the last thing life teaches us. Maybe the final mercy is not that death spares everyone pain, but that it may spare many people the fear they carried about it while they were still alive. And if that is true, then perhaps the darkest question we ask in secret hides an unexpectedly gentle possibility at its center. See you in the next video, where the questions only get darker.